My name is Mackenzie Elliott. I'm 32, and I never thought I'd be filing theft charges against my own parents. For years, I prided myself on my perfect credit score and financial stability. Then, 3 days before my birthday, I discovered my credit card maxed out and $25,000 missing. When I confronted my parents, Dad snapped, "The family needed it more," and Mom laughed, "You can celebrate alone. We had better plans." Their smug faces changed when I replied, "Then don't ever call me again." They never expected what I did next. Before I dive into this nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family members who felt entitled to your money. Trust me, what happens next in this story will show you exactly why setting boundaries with toxic family is the most important gift you can give yourself. I grew up in a household where money was always a source of tension. My parents, Diana and Frank Elliott, were what financial advisors would politely call poor money managers. What that really means is they spent every dollar they earned and then some, with no concept of saving or planning for the future. Our home in suburban Massachusetts was a constant cycle of feast or famine. One month, Dad would come home with expensive electronics we couldn't afford. The next, Mom would be crying at the kitchen table over past due notices. I learned early on that our electricity being shut off wasn't unusual, and that the phrase "card declined" would make my stomach drop even before I understood what it meant. By 13, I was working under-the-table jobs to buy my own school supplies. By 16, I was hiding my babysitting money because any cash left visible in our house mysteriously disappeared. My parents never apologized for taking my money. They just said, "This is what families do." College became my escape plan. While my friends had parents setting up college funds, mine were remortgaging our house for the third time. I applied for every scholarship available, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and worked 30 hours a week at a local cafe. I still remember my mother's reaction when my acceptance letter to Boston University arrived with a substantial scholarship. "Well, don't expect us to help with anything," she said, as if I'd ever made that assumption. I graduated with minimal student loans, which I paid off within 5 years through careful budgeting and my growing career in event planning. I built my business client by client, eventually establishing myself as one of Boston's go-to planners for corporate events. The irony wasn't lost on me that I made my living creating memorable celebrations for others, while my own childhood birthdays were often forgotten or canceled due to financial emergencies. As my career flourished, the dynamic with my parents shifted. They went from dismissing my achievements to suddenly taking an interest in my comfortable lifestyle. The occasional requests for small loans began around my 27th birthday. A few $100s here, 1,000 there, always with some emergency attached and promises to repay that never materialized. "Just until payday," Dad would say. "We'd do the same for you," Mom would add, conveniently forgetting they never had. I started setting boundaries after lending them $3,000 for essential home repairs, only to see Facebook photos of them at a luxury casino resort the following weekend. When confronted, they accused me of keeping score and being selfish with family. 2 years ago, after much therapy and boundary-setting work, I established clear financial separations. I would help with true emergencies only, and no more direct cash transfers. I even added my credit card to their phones for absolute emergencies only, medical situations, car breakdowns in dangerous areas, with explicit instructions to call me first. My therapist warned me that this was still leaving the door open for potential abuse, but I couldn't imagine my parents would risk our fragile relationship for money. I needed to believe they had some line they wouldn't cross. My 32nd birthday was approaching, and for once, I decided to really celebrate my achievements. I planned a weekend trip to Nantucket with my closest friends, people who supported me through building my business and setting healthy boundaries, people who celebrated my successes instead of diminishing them. I'd been saving specifically for this trip, excited to create the kind of birthday memory I'd never had growing up. I had no idea that my parents had been watching my social media posts about the upcoming celebration, calculating exactly how much they could take from me while I was distracted with planning. I had no idea they saw my happiness as a resource to exploit rather than share. I didn't realize they were capable of stealing from their own daughter. The discovery happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was finalizing reservations for my birthday weekend, confirming the oceanfront rental and booking a private chef for Saturday night. I reached for my premium rewards credit card, the one I'd worked so hard to qualify for, and logged into the account to check my available credit before making the final deposits. The screen loaded, and my heart stopped. Available credit, $0. Current balance, $25,000. I blinked hard, refreshed the page, and stared in disbelief. This had to be a mistake. I scrolled frantically through the recent transactions, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Nordstrom, $3,246.78. Best Buy, $4,189.53. Bass Pro Shops, $2,875.22. Ticketmaster, $1,698.50. Marriott Hotels, $4,782.90. Apple Store, $3,899.99. 3 restaurant charges totaling over $1,000. And dozens of smaller purchases, all made in the past week. None of these were mine. I immediately called the credit card company, my voice trembling as I reported unauthorized charges. The customer service representative asked for details about the last legitimate purchase I'd made. "Have you lost your physical card, Ms. Elliott?" "No, it's right here in my wallet." "I see these charges were made with the physical card, not online transactions." "That's impossible. My card is right here." Then the representative said something that made my blood run cold. "The purchases were made at locations in Springfield. Our records show you have an additional card on this account registered to a Diana Elliott." Would that be correct? My emergency card. The one I'd added to my mother's phone digital wallet 2 years ago. "Can you tell me when these charges started?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. The first charge appears to be from Bass Pro Shops last Thursday, followed by last Thursday. The day after I'd posted about my birthday trip plans on Instagram, mentioning the budget I'd saved and how excited I was to finally treat myself. I hung up after disputing the charges and immediately checked social media. My mother had been unusually active. There she was, showing off a new designer purse with the Nordstrom bag visible in the background. Another post showed my father with high-end fishing gear outside Bass Pro Shops, grinning like he'd won the lottery. And the final confirmation, a smiling selfie of them both captioned "Surprise vacation booked." Sometimes you just need to treat yourself. They had treated themselves. With my money. With the money for my first real birthday celebration. I felt physically ill. The room spun as I tried to process this level of betrayal. This wasn't just about the money, it was the calculated nature of it. They'd seen my happiness and decided to steal it. I tried calling them repeatedly. No answer. Texts went unread. They were deliberately avoiding me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the transaction list scrolling endlessly. $25,000. Money I'd worked hard for, saved carefully, built my credit score to earn. My hands shook as I made tea at 3 a.m., trying to calm myself enough to think clearly. By morning, my shock had hardened into something else, determination. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a one-time mistake. This was theft, pure and simple, from the people who were supposed to protect me, not prey on me. I took the day off work, something I rarely did. I couldn't focus on planning other people's celebrations when my own had been so deliberately destroyed. Instead, I meticulously documented everything, screenshots of the transactions, Their social media posts flaunting their purchases, our text history showing they were ignoring me. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother, enjoying your special pre-birthday week. Can't wait to hear about your trip. The audacity was breathtaking. They were pretending nothing had happened, perhaps hoping I wouldn't check my credit card until after my birthday weekend. By then, they probably planned to have some excuse ready, some family emergency that forced them to use my card. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I got in my car and drove the 2 hours to Springfield. This wasn't a conversation for phone calls or texts. I needed to see their faces when they explained why they thought it was acceptable to steal $25,000 from their daughter. The drive to my parents' house gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I'd say. I practiced keeping my voice steady, presenting the evidence calmly, asking direct questions without emotional outbursts. I wanted to be rational and composed, everything they never taught me to be when facing conflict. Their house looked the same as always, modest ranch style with peeling paint and an unkempt lawn. Only now there was a brand new truck in the driveway that definitely wasn't there during my last visit. My stomach clenched. Another purchase on my dime? I knocked instead of using my key. This wasn't a family visit. This was a confrontation with people who had stolen from me. My mother answered, her surprise at seeing me quickly masked with an overly bright smile. Mackenzie, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you until after your big birthday trip. She hugged me as if everything was normal, as if she hadn't maxed out my credit card just days earlier. I remained stiff in her embrace. Is Dad home? I asked flatly. In the living room. Come in, come in. Want some coffee? The casual normality was surreal. I followed her into the living room where my father sat watching a sports game on a television that looked suspiciously larger than the one they'd had during my last visit. Look who stopped by, my mother announced cheerfully. Dad glanced up. Hey, kiddo. What brings you all the way out here? Thought you'd be busy with birthday planning. I remained standing, despite Mom gesturing toward the couch. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. I am here about my birthday, actually. Specifically about how I discovered my credit card is maxed out with $25,000 in charges I didn't make. The room went silent. My mother's smile faltered, but didn't completely disappear. My father's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. I spoke with the credit card company, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. All charges were made on the emergency card I added to Mom's phone. For emergencies only. My mother laughed nervously. Oh, that. I was going to tell you about that. There was a misunderstanding with the digital wallet thing. I thought I was using our card. For Nordstrom purchases? For concert tickets? For a hotel reservation? I scrolled through screenshots on my phone, and I suppose Dad also accidentally used the wrong card at Bass Pro Shops, and for the down payment on that new truck outside. My father shifted in his recliner, his jaw tightening. Look, we were going to sort it out. It's not like we weren't going to tell you. When? After you'd spent even more? After my birthday had passed and the trip I've been saving for was ruined. My mother's fake smile finally dropped. Don't be so dramatic, Mackenzie. It's just money. We needed a few things. $25,000 worth of things that you needed more than I needed my own savings? More than I needed to celebrate my birthday. About that, my father interjected, sitting forward. We were thinking your trip seems a bit excessive. All that money for just a weekend? That's irresponsible. The audacity left me momentarily speechless. They had stolen from me and were now lecturing me about financial responsibility. You stole from me, I said, my voice quieter now, which somehow made the words land harder. You committed credit card fraud. You stole $25,000 from your own daughter. My father's face flushed red. Now you listen here. We raised you. We put clothes on your back and food in your mouth for 18 years. If we needed to borrow some money. Borrow? I interrupted. You didn't ask. You didn't borrow. You stole. And apparently this isn't the first time. My mother's expression changed, suddenly wary. What do you mean? I pulled up another screen on my phone. The credit card company sent me a complete transaction history. There have been smaller charges over the past year. Hundreds here, 1,000 there. I always assumed those were my purchases since they were in local stores I shop at. But they weren't, were they? You've been stealing smaller amounts all along, hoping I wouldn't notice. Their silence confirmed it. I felt sick all over again. Why? I asked. Why would you do this to me? I've helped you when you needed it. I've given you money when you asked. Why steal from me? My father stood up abruptly, his face now deep crimson. The family needed it more, he snapped, voice rising. Your mother and I have been struggling while you're off planning fancy parties and taking luxury trips. What kind of daughter flaunts her money while her parents can barely make ends meet? I earned that money, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. Every dollar. I worked for it. I saved for it. It's mine to spend how I choose. My mother laughed then, a cold sound I'd heard many times growing up. Usually when dismissing my achievements or boundaries. You can celebrate alone, we had better plans, she said with a wave of her hand, showcasing a new manicure that had undoubtedly been charged to my card. That trip was selfish anyway. Family comes first, Mackenzie. We raised you better than that. In that moment, I saw them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. Not as the parents who had failed me but tried their best, the narrative I'd clung to through years of therapy, but as people who genuinely believed they were entitled to everything I had. People who saw my success not as something to celebrate but as a resource to exploit. People who would never change. A strange calm washed over me. I straightened my shoulders and looked them both in the eye. Then don't ever call me again, I said quietly. They both stared at me, momentarily stunned by my tone. Don't be ridiculous, my mother finally said. You're overreacting. It's just money. We're family. Not anymore, I replied, turning toward the door. I've disputed the charges as fraud. The credit card company has opened an investigation. They have the evidence, including your social media posts showing off your purchases. My father stepped toward me, his expression suddenly anxious. Now wait a minute, Mackenzie. Let's not be hasty. We can work something out. There's nothing to work out, I said, my hand on the doorknob. You stole from me. You betrayed me. And you're not even sorry. Of course we're sorry you're upset, my mother said quickly. We should have talked to you first. But you're not sorry you did it, I finished for her. You're only sorry you got caught. I walked out, ignoring their calls behind me. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I realized I felt something unexpected, relief. The constant anxiety of waiting for their next crisis, their next demand, their next manipulation, it was over. I was finally free of the obligation I'd felt toward people who had never felt the same toward me. On the drive home, my phone lit up with texts and calls from both of them, cycling through their usual tactics: anger, guilt, minimization, fake apologies. I ignored them all. I needed to focus on what came next. Back in my apartment that evening, I turned off my phone and sat at my dining table with a glass of wine, surrounded by financial documents I'd pulled from my files. The reality of my situation was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about the credit card fraud. There were deeper financial entanglements I'd allowed to persist. Over the years, trying to help my parents achieve stability, I'd co-signed for their mortgage refinance after they fell behind on payments. I'd co-signed for my father's truck loan when his credit wasn't good enough. I'd set up automatic payments from my account for their cell phone bill, internet service, and even their monthly streaming subscriptions. All with the hope that relieving these financial pressures would help them become more responsible. Instead, they'd taken my support as permission to spend even more recklessly. I thought about what my therapist, Dr. Abrams, had said during our last session. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. At the time, I wasn't ready to hear it. I'd held onto the belief that I could somehow fix my parents' financial behavior if I just found the right approach, the right boundaries, the right combination of help and firmness. Now I realized how naive that was. As I reviewed the documents, memories flooded back. My 12th birthday canceled because they'd spent the money on a new entertainment system. My high school graduation dinner where they'd left me with a check because they'd forgotten their credit cards. The time my car needed repairs during college, and they'd told me I was selfish for not taking the bus so they could use my emergency fund for a weekend getaway. It wasn't just this credit card theft. It was a lifetime of financial abuse disguised as family dynamics. I picked up a framed photo from my bookshelf. Me at my college graduation, standing between my parents, their proud smiles at odds with the comments they'd made earlier that day about how my scholarship must not have been that hard to get, and how I shouldn't get too comfortable with academic success. Why have I kept trying? I asked the empty room, tears finally spilling over. Because they were my parents. Because I'd been conditioned to believe their approval was something I needed to earn over and over without ever quite succeeding. Because some part of me still hoped that one day they would be proud of me simply for who I was, not for what they could get from me. But that day wasn't coming. They had shown me exactly who they were, not just with this theft, but throughout my life. They would take and take until there was nothing left, and still believe they were entitled to more. I wiped my tears and pulled out a notebook. It was time to make a plan, not from emotion but from clarity. I started listing every financial connection between us. 1. Mortgage cosigner. 2. Truck loan cosigner. 3. Cell phone plan. 4. Internet bill automatic payment. 5. Streaming services. 6. Emergency credit card access. 7. Joint bank account established when I was a teenager and used but still open. Next, I listed what I needed to do. 1. Contact credit card company. Follow up on fraud investigation. 2. Consult attorney about mortgage and truck loan liability. 3. Cancel all automatic payments. 4. Close joint account. 5. Change all passwords and security questions. 6. Set up credit monitoring service. 7. File police report for credit card theft. My hand trembled as I wrote the last item. Filing a police report against my own parents felt extreme, even now. But as Dr. Abrams often reminded me, my normal meter had been calibrated in an abnormal environment. What felt extreme to me was actually appropriate self-protection against a serious crime. I checked the time, nearly midnight. Most of these actions would have to wait until morning, but there were a few things I could do immediately. I reopened my laptop and began systematically changing passwords on all my accounts, removing payment information from any site where it was stored, and canceling the automatic payments I'd set up for their bills. For each action I took, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and liberation. The guilt was an old, familiar feeling, the voice in my head that said I was being selfish, that family helps family, that I should forgive because they were my parents. But the liberation was new and powerful, the knowledge that I was finally protecting myself, honoring my worth, refusing to be victimized any longer. By 2 a.m., I'd done everything I could for the night. I checked my phone one last time before bed. 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I scrolled through them quickly. You're overreacting. We need to talk about this like adults. After everything we've done for you, you'll regret this when you calm down. Family doesn't abandon family. Not a single genuine apology. Not a hint of true remorse. Just manipulation, guilt-tripping, and attempts to minimize what they'd done. I turned off my phone completely and went to bed, more certain than ever about the path forward. Tomorrow would be difficult, but necessary. I was taking back control of my life, my finances, and my future. And ironically, it was the best birthday gift I could give myself. I woke up early the next morning with a clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to hurt my parents or make them suffer. I just wanted to protect myself and establish consequences for their actions. If they experienced hardship as a result, it would be the natural outcome of their own choices, not my intention. First, I called my bank and scheduled an appointment with their fraud department. The representative was sympathetic but professional as I explained the situation. Unfortunately, we see this type of family financial exploitation more often than you might think, she said. We'll need you to come in and sign some paperwork, but we can freeze the joint account immediately. Next, I called the credit card company for an update on the fraud investigation. They confirmed they were proceeding based on my dispute and the evidence I'd provided. The representative explained that criminal fraud involving family members was complicated, but they had clear protocols. We've already reversed the charges temporarily while we investigate, she explained. You won't be responsible for the fraudulent charges once our investigation concludes. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. At least my birthday trip wasn't completely ruined financially, though the emotional damage remained. My most difficult call was to an attorney who specialized in financial law. I'd found her through a recommendation from a client who had gone through a similar situation with an ex-spouse. When I explained my situation, she immediately recognized the seriousness. You need to address the mortgage and vehicle loan immediately, she advised. As a co-signer, you're legally responsible for those payments if they default, which seems likely given their pattern of behavior. She outlined my options, none of them simple. For the mortgage, I could petition to be removed as a co-signer, but it would require my parents' cooperation or a court order. Given their response so far, cooperation seemed unlikely. For the truck loan, you can notify the lender of the fraud situation, she continued. While it won't immediately remove you as co-signer, it creates a paper trail that can help if you need to take legal action later. We scheduled a formal consultation for the following day, and I hung up feeling overwhelmed but determined. This would be a marathon, not a sprint. My next stop was the police station. I'd been dreading this moment, but I couldn't put it off any longer. The officer who took my report was matter-of-fact, which helped me maintain my composure. Credit card fraud is a serious offense, he explained as I signed the formal complaint. The fact that the perpetrators are family members doesn't change that. When he asked if I wanted to press charges, I hesitated only briefly before nodding. Yes, they need to face consequences for once in their lives. By mid-afternoon, I'd notified all 3 major credit bureaus of the fraud and placed alerts on my accounts. I'd canceled every automatic payment I'd set up for my parents' bills. I'd changed all my passwords, security questions, and contact information on every account I owned. As I drove home, my phone rang through my car's Bluetooth. It was the mortgage company returning my call from earlier. I took a deep breath and answered. Ms. Elliott, I've reviewed your situation, the mortgage officer said. Unfortunately, removing yourself as co-signer would require refinancing, which would be challenging given the other borrower's credit history. I understand, I replied. But I need you to know that I will no longer be making payments on this mortgage. My parents committed fraud against me, and I have filed a police report. I am severing all financial ties with them. I'm sorry to hear about your situation, he said, his tone softening slightly. I should inform you that if payments are missed, it will affect your credit as a co-signer. I'm aware, I said. I've already consulted with an attorney. I'll accept that consequence if necessary. After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. My perfect credit score, something I'd worked so hard to build and maintain, might be damaged. Yet I felt oddly at peace with that possibility. A credit score could be rebuilt. My self-respect and boundaries were more important. When I got home, I found 3 voicemails from my father. I steeled myself and listened. Mackenzie, the bank called us. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was tight with anger. They said you're disputing the mortgage payments. You can't do that. You signed those papers. The second message was shorter. The truck payment didn't go through. Fix this now. The third, left just minutes before I checked, had a different tone, panic edging into his voice. The credit card company called. They said something about fraud charges. You need to call them and explain this was a misunderstanding. Mackenzie, this is serious. Call me back immediately. I deleted all 3 without responding. Let them feel the panic and uncertainty I'd felt when I discovered they'd stolen $25,000 from me. Let them experience consequences for once. My mother texted next, "Your father is very upset. I don't know what you've done, but you need to fix it right away. This isn't how we raised you to treat family." I almost laughed at the absurdity. This wasn't how they raised me? They'd raised me to believe I was responsible for their financial well-being. They'd raised me to accept their exploitation as normal. They'd raised me to feel guilty for having boundaries. But I wasn't that person anymore. I blocked both their numbers, then turned to my laptop. There was one more thing I needed to do. I opened my email and composed a message to my entire extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, people I rarely spoke to but who would inevitably be drawn into the situation when my parents started seeking sympathy and financial support. Dear family, I wrote, I want to inform you of a situation before you hear a distorted version. My parents have committed credit card fraud against me, stealing $25,000. I have filed a police report and am severing all financial ties with them. I understand they may reach out to you for help or to vilify me. You are free to form your own opinions, but these are the facts. I am taking necessary steps to protect myself after years of financial exploitation. I hope you can respect my decision. I hesitated before hitting send, knowing this would burn bridges beyond just my parents. But I also knew my parents would spin a story that made them the victims and me the villain. At least this way, the truth would be out there. I hit send, then closed my laptop. The sun was setting outside my window. Tomorrow would be my birthday, not the celebration I had planned, but perhaps something more significant, the first day of a new chapter in my life. One where I valued myself enough to enforce consequences, even when it was painful. That night, I changed my social media profiles to private and ordered takeout from my favorite restaurant. As I ate dinner alone in my quiet apartment, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years. The chains of obligation and guilt that had bound me to my parents' financial chaos were broken. This wasn't the revenge fantasy some might have imagined. I hadn't destroyed their lives or sought to cause them pain. I had simply stopped protecting them from reality. Stopped being their safety net. Stopped sacrificing my well-being for people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. And that, I realized, was the most powerful response of all. The morning of my 32nd birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing with birthday wishes from friends, real friends who celebrated my successes without expecting to profit from them. For a moment, I lay there letting the contrast sink in, the genuine warmth of these messages versus the calculated manipulation I'd grown up with. I'd canceled the Nantucket trip. It didn't feel right to celebrate while in the midst of such upheaval, but my friends had other plans. Jessica, my best friend since college, showed up at my door at 10 a.m. with coffee and pastries. "Happy birthday," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I know everything's crazy right now, but you're not spending today alone." She wasn't the only one. Throughout the day, friends stopped by with small gifts, food, and most importantly, their presence. By evening, my apartment was filled with people who truly cared about me, who had organized an impromptu birthday gathering when they learned what had happened. To Mackenzie, Jessica toasted, raising her glass. Who taught us all what real strength looks like? Amid the celebration, my phone continued to blow up with notifications. I'd unblocked my parents' numbers that morning, curious to see their response when they realized the full extent of what I'd done. The messages ranged from rage to manipulation to faux concern. "You've ruined everything. I hope you're happy. Dad, 8:17 a.m. The bank is threatening foreclosure. This is your fault. Dad, 9:45 a.m. I can't believe you do this to your own parents. Mom, 10:23 a.m. We're worried about you. This isn't like you. Mom, 11:56 a.m. Your father had to go to the ER with chest pains. Are you trying to kill him? Mom, 2:34 p.m. The last one made me pause, my old conditioning kicking in. Was Dad really in the hospital? Was I responsible? Jessica saw my expression change and gently took the phone from my hand. Classic manipulation, she said after reading the message. Notice how there's no hospital name, no actual diagnosis, no request for you to visit, just the accusation that you caused it. She was right. This was a familiar tactic, one they'd used whenever I tried to establish boundaries in the past. A health scare, real or imagined, designed to pull me back into the cycle of obligation and guilt. I put the phone away and rejoined my friends, but the emotional whiplash continued throughout the evening as family members began responding to my email. And Patricia, I always knew Diana and Frank were irresponsible, but theft? I'm so sorry, Mackenzie. Uncle Robert, you should be ashamed, turning against your parents like this. Family problems should stay private. Cousin Michael, they called asking for money yesterday. Now I understand why. Stay strong. It was exactly as I'd expected. Some support, some condemnation, and the confirmation that my parents were already seeking new financial victims. I felt validated in my decision to send that email, despite the bridges it might burn. The next morning, I met with my attorney, Linda Perkins, who helped me file formal documentation with all relevant financial institutions regarding the fraud. She also prepared a cease and desist letter to my parents, legally instructing them not to contact me. It won't necessarily stop them, she explained, but it establishes a paper trail if we need to pursue further legal action, like a restraining order. When I expressed concern about the mortgage situation, she was direct but compassionate. Your credit will take a hit in the short term, she acknowledged. But we can work with the credit bureaus to include explanatory statements on your report. And remember, this is temporary. You can rebuild your credit. You can't rebuild your life if you remain financially entangled with people who exploit you. The credit card company completed their investigation within a week, formally confirming the charges as fraudulent and removing them permanently from my account. They also provided documentation for the police investigation, which was proceeding slowly but steadily. My parents received a formal notice from the police department regarding the fraud charges. Their response was a barrage of voicemails alternating between threats and tearful pleas. You can't possibly testify against your own parents. No judge would side with you. We raised you. We gave you everything. How can you do this to us? If you drop this now, we can forget it ever happened and be a family again. Each message reinforced that I'd made the right decision. Not once did they acknowledge what they'd done or express genuine remorse. It was always about them, their needs, their feelings, their convenience. The flying monkeys arrived next, family, friends, and distant relatives who suddenly felt compelled to help reconcile the situation. Your parents made a mistake, but they love you, said Mrs. Landry, my mother's friend from church. You need to forgive them. That's what family does. They're not perfect, but who is, said my father's cousin Greg. Don't throw away your relationship over money. I had prepared responses for these interventions, thanks to advice from Dr. Abrams. I appreciate your concern, but this is between my parents and me. This isn't about one mistake. It's about a pattern of behavior that I can no longer accept. I'm not making this decision lightly or in anger. I'm protecting myself. Some understood and respected my boundaries. Others persisted until I had to distance myself from them too. With each conversation, I grew more confident in my decision and more adept at articulating my boundaries. 3 weeks after my birthday, I received an unexpected call from Detective Wilson, who was handling my case. Ms. Elliott, I wanted to update you personally. We've completed our investigation and will be formally charging your parents with credit card fraud and identity theft. My heart raced. What happens next? They'll be served with summons to appear in court. Given the amount involved and the clear evidence, the prosecutor believes this case is solid. However, I should prepare you. First-time offenders in these cases often receive probation rather than jail time, especially when they're older. I assured him I understood. This isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about accountability and consequences. After hanging up, I sat quietly processing this development. My parents would have criminal charges on their record. They would face a judge and be forced to acknowledge what they'd done, not just to me, but to the legal system. No manipulation or guilt-tripping would erase that reality. That evening, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, from my mother. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. "Dearest Mackenzie," it began, her handwriting shakier than I remembered. "We've been informed of the charges against us. I don't understand how you could do this to the people who gave you life. Your father barely sleeps. Our neighbors look at us differently. Is this what you wanted? To destroy our lives over a simple misunderstanding? We only borrowed the money. We would have paid it back eventually. That's what family does. They help each other without keeping score. I pray you'll come to your senses before it's too late to repair the damage you're causing." Not once in the 3-page letter did she acknowledge their theft or express remorse. It was all about their suffering, their embarrassment, their inconvenience. The word borrowed particularly stood out. As if taking $25,000 without permission could ever be considered borrowing. I folded the letter and placed it in a folder with all the other documentation, the credit card statements, the police report, the cease and desist letter. This wasn't just for legal purposes anymore. It was a reminder of why I'd taken this stand, evidence I could review if I ever found myself weakening or doubting my decision. As the weeks passed, I slowly rebuilt my routine. I refocused on my business, which had suffered during the crisis. I continued therapy, working through the complex emotions of grieving parents who were still alive but no longer in my life. I began rebuilding my savings, accepting that my credit score would take time to recover, but knowing it would. Most importantly, I started redefining what family meant to me. Blood relation had never guaranteed me love, support, or respect. Those had come from the chosen family I'd built. Friends who showed up on my worst days, colleagues who celebrated my successes without envy, even clients who valued my work and treated me with professional respect. 6 months after my 32nd birthday, I received another call from Detective Wilson. "Ms. Elliott, I wanted to let you know personally. Your parents have accepted a plea deal. They'll serve 2 years of probation, pay restitution, and complete financial counseling." The judge was particularly firm about the counseling requirement. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, surprised by my lack of emotional response. I felt neither vindication nor sadness, just a quiet acceptance that justice, however imperfect, had been served. "There's one more thing," he added. Part of their plea agreement included a no-contact order. They are legally prohibited from contacting you directly for the duration of their probation. After hanging up, I walked to my window and looked out at the Boston skyline. 2 years of guaranteed peace. 2 years to continue healing, building boundaries, and creating a life defined by respect rather than exploitation. It wasn't the ending I would have written for my family story, but it was the beginning of a new chapter for me, one where I was the author, not a character in someone else's narrative. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. 1 year after that fateful birthday, I found myself standing on the deck of a rented beach house in Nantucket. The ocean stretched before me, vast and peaceful in the early morning light. I'd finally taken the trip I'd planned, not as a rushed weekend getaway, but as a full week of celebration with my chosen family. Jessica joined me on the deck, handing me a steaming mug of coffee. "Happy birthday, Mac." "Thanks," I said, smiling. "It feels good to be here." "You earned it," she replied. "This year hasn't been easy." That was an understatement. The past 12 months had been a journey through loss, healing, rebuilding, and ultimately, growth. The legal consequences for my parents had played out as expected. They completed their financial counseling requirement with apparent resentment, according to updates I received from the probation office. The restitution payments came regularly but were accompanied by notes, payment for your loyalty, or hope this buys your forgiveness. Until I requested they be sent directly to my attorney instead. My extended family had mostly retreated after the initial flurry of reactions. A few relatives maintained contact, expressing support for my boundaries. Others sided firmly with my parents, sending occasional messages about the importance of forgiveness and family loyalty. I responded politely but firmly to these, explaining that forgiveness was my personal journey and didn't require reconciliation or continued contact. My credit score had taken the hit my attorney predicted when my parents defaulted on their mortgage. However, with her help, I'd successfully petitioned to have explanatory notes added to my credit report detailing the circumstances. I'd also worked diligently to strengthen other aspects of my financial profile, and the damage was gradually healing. Professionally, I'd turned my experience into an unexpected opportunity. After sharing my story at a women's business luncheon, I was approached about developing financial empowerment workshops for young adults. These sessions focused on establishing healthy financial boundaries, recognizing financial abuse, and building security independently. What began as a side project was now becoming a significant part of my business model. Most importantly, I'd done the internal work necessary to process my parents' betrayal and my decision to cut ties with them. Dr. Abrams had guided me through the complex grief of family estrangement, the mourning not just for what I'd lost, but for what I'd never had in the first place, parents who prioritized my well-being over their desires. The beach house rental is ready whenever you are, Jessica said, interrupting my thoughts. Everyone should be arriving by noon. I nodded, taking another sip of coffee. I still can't believe you organized all this. She shrugged, smiling. That's what real family does. Real family. The phrase resonated deeply. Over the past year, I'd redefined that concept entirely. Real family weren't the people who shared my DNA but saw me as a resource to exploit. Real family were the people who showed up consistently with respect, support, and genuine care. The celebration that weekend was everything I'd always wanted my birthdays to be: joyful, relaxed, filled with laughter and meaningful connection. No drama, no financial crises, no guilt or manipulation tainting the experience. Just pure celebration with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. On the final evening, as we gathered for dinner on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, my friend Marcus raised his glass. To Mackenzie, he said, who taught us all that the greatest act of self-love is sometimes saying no to those who claim to love you, but show it only with words, never actions. To boundaries, added Jessica, and the courage to enforce them. To chosen family, I said, raising my own glass. And to freedom. Later that night, alone on the deck, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened my journal and wrote, today I turned 33. 1 year ago, I thought my life was falling apart when I discovered my parents had stolen $25,000 from me. Now I understand it was actually falling into place. That theft was the final push I needed to break free from a lifetime of financial and emotional exploitation. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by respect, support, and mutual care. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can release my anger without allowing the same people to hurt me again. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by what I can give others, but by the standards I set for how I allow myself to be treated. The journey hasn't been easy. There are still days when I doubt my decision, when the conditioning of a lifetime tries to pull me back into guilt and obligation. But those days grow fewer as I continue to experience the peace and authenticity of living with clear boundaries. My parents may never understand or accept the consequences of their actions. They may go to their graves believing they were entitled to take what was mine, that family obligation supersedes personal boundaries. That's their journey, not mine. My journey is about building a life defined by mutual respect rather than exploitation. It's about creating celebrations that aren't shadowed by manipulation or crisis. It's about choosing connection with people who enhance my life rather than drain it. Today, surrounded by my chosen family, I feel not just 1 year older, but immeasurably wiser. And for that wisdom, paradoxically, I have my parents to thank. Their betrayal was the catalyst for my liberation. In trying to take what was mine, they ultimately gave me the greatest gift, the permission to finally, completely, let them go. I closed the journal, feeling a profound sense of peace as I gazed at the stars above the ocean. The family I was born into had never been capable of giving me what I needed. But the family I had chosen and the stronger self I had become more than made up for that loss. Some might see my story as one of tragedy, a daughter forced to sever ties with her parents, family relationships irreparably broken. But I saw it differently. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Not a loss, but a reclamation of my worth, my boundaries, and ultimately my life. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from loved ones who continually crossed your boundaries? What helped you find the strength to stand firm? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more content about setting healthy boundaries and building authentic relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being, even when it means saying no to family. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you all find the courage to honor your worth, even when, especially when those who should value you the most try to convince you that you're asking for too much. You're not. You deserve respect, honesty, and love that doesn't come with conditions. Never forget that.